propose changes to the traffic light system then, or have you got a completely different system planned?
But we never thought the traffic light system would really stand the test of time. When it was released and announced by the government, we were calling for a very clear, almost like red and green list. It's either safe to go or it isn't safe to go, to give confidence to people. I mean, the number of people who have booked to go away in good faith that are now having plans changed, I mean, France being the most recent example, doesn't instill confidence to the travelling public and does affect the industry. So it's very important that we have clarity, that it's based on data, and that the criteria by which each country is being assessed is transparent.
So where would you put Spain and Greece then? Would they be on the green list?
Well, we've been asking the government to produce the data. When we spoke in Parliament last week, we asked the government at that time, why did they place France on the Amber Plus list when at the time it was showing lower infection rates of the Beta variant, which was the reason the government gave for placing it in tighter restrictions, than Spain was at that time. And the government didn't have an answer for that. And, we can only go off the information that's published, and the government have published very little of it.
Isn't it the case, though, that really Brits should probably just give up their idea of going abroad this summer? They should have a staycation or a holiday somewhere in the UK, enjoy the delights that this country has to offer them, and go abroad next year instead.
I think many people will be making that personal choice, but in terms of what the government ought to do, they ought to be clear about whether it's safe to go or not. If it is safe to go, they should give people the confidence that the country they're going to won't be thrown onto an Amber Plus list or a red list while they're there, which means that they have to go self-isolate on return, causing chaos in terms of work plans and personal plans. We need to make sure that there is a clear plan in place that gives people confidence. And if the government really want people to stay at home and have a staycation, well, that's fine if that's a government's plan, but they should be honest about that. And critically, they should give aviation, tourism and travel the financial support they're going to need to what will be, support them through a very long recovery.
What sort of support are you talking about? Are you talking about an extension of the furlough scheme, for instance, for aviation, given there are so few flights taking people out of the country on holiday at the moment?
Yeah, we've been pushing the government to provide a aviation sector deal, and what that would mean is it would give a number of financial support packages to aviation. So, greater business rate relief, extension to furlough, but also a more flexible approach to furlough as well, that would take us into next year. And the reason for that is they've already lost one summer, they're very likely to lose a second summer, and in an industry that is very seasonal, but supports over 1.5 million jobs in our country, we can't afford just to suck it and see how many people will be made redundant. It's critical that we support those jobs.
Now, what is Labour's policy on vaccine passports? Where do you stand on that at the moment?
We've been very clear that an international vaccine passport has a lot of advantages. It gives other nations confidence that British travellers going into their country are safer because they've been double vaccinated. But we're also very clear that it's just not an option, we don't believe, to have a domestic vaccination passport where you need to prove your double dose before you can go about your everyday business in the country where you live.
So you would oppose domestic vaccine passports if the government brought them to a vote in the Commons?
Well, I mean, it's a matter of fact that if you were to have that in place, you are going to be restricting people who, through no fault of their own, are not able to get the vaccination for underlying health reasons. And it can't be that their freedoms are curtailed because of that circumstance. If you were to have a vaccination passport, for instance, to go to the local pub, well, how can that be fair for people who have no choice but to refuse the vaccination? Because if they were to take it, it would cause even greater health problems. So it's just not tenable, and the government need to make sure that they are really clear with the messaging, they're really clear with the plan that will be in place to support us through this recovery, and what they don't do is to undermine public confidence. And I think when they float ideas in the weekend press just to see how it lands, that adds more confusion to the British public.
What about for nightclubs? Would you support COVID certification for people going into nightclubs?
Not particularly for a vaccination passport. We absolutely, though, believe that where you're having a mass gathering, we are not through the pandemic yet. We know that over the last 7 days, over 5,000 people were admitted to hospital with COVID symptoms. That's up 1,100 on the week before. So, we are not through this by any means, but we believe the best way to deal with many of the consequences of COVID, whether it's about people being pinged and being forced to self-isolate, whether it's about managing the impact of mass gatherings. But the best way to protect all of us is to have testing in place. If people have a test that proves they're negative, then of course they're safe to go into a venue and to circulate. If they test and they're positive, they absolutely should not be attending. You can only have that system in place, though, if you have a robust testing system in place. And again, in terms of messaging and the plan, it frankly doesn't help that the government are muting that they might now start charging for tests.
So, what about if the government brought a domestic vaccine passport to the House of Commons along with testing? So people could either show their vaccine passport or they could be tested. Or is it for you that the vaccines don't actually matter, you just want testing?
Well, we believe that testing is the best route, because what we all want to know is that people who are carrying COVID, maybe showing no symptoms, are not infecting the rest of the population. That's what we want to know. Even with a vaccination, and of course we're massively pushing people to get double vaccinated. I had my second dose this morning, so I encourage people to do that as well. That doesn't give you absolute security against carrying the virus. There is still that small chance that you might carry it and infect somebody else. So testing is critical.
Let's just talk a little bit about the Labour Party. You've had a number of changes and a number of proposals put forward by Keir Starmer that would prescribe far left, as they're described, groups within the party. So it's a bit of a purge, really, isn't it, of the left wing? Is that right?
Not at all. It's very important that the Labour Party holds ourselves to a high standard, and that the membership of the Labour Party is both supportive of our aim, which is to see a Labour government, and are respectful of other people. Where that doesn't happen, where our rules are breached, then of course the party has to take action.
But shouldn't you be trying to bring the party together and unite against the Tories rather than creating more division, more internal rows, which we know from years of polling that the public hate divided parties?
What I hear when I canvass in Oldham is that people want us to get our house in order. People want us to deal with the anti-Semitism. People want us to deal with extreme elements of the party that don't actually share our common bond, who don't particularly work hard to realise a Labour government, because it's all about fractions and infighting. And, when I speak to everyday people who are desperate to see a Labour government, they want us to be looking outward at the country. But to win their trust, we have got to get our own house in order. And I think that's what the NEC, the Labour Party, are trying to do, both in terms of the membership and the rules that govern our party, but also the financial rigour of the party as well.
How close are you to getting your house in order in terms of, firstly, the anti-Semitism complaints that you've had to deal with? You've had a big backlog to deal with since Keir Starmer became leader.
Well, of course, the backlog was there before Keir Starmer became leader, and what he was very clear about when he became the leader, and of course David Evans is our new General Secretary, is that there is no greater priority than dealing with the consequences of the EHRC report that found anti-Semitism was rife in the Labour Party. We know we had to deal with that and take it head on. We had to give additional capacity to deal with the backlog of complaints, and we are in a better place. But of course, the test is never the number of complaints that are backlogged, although it's important that we deal with those in an efficient manner. It's where the Jewish people feel that the Labour Party is a home where they feel comfortable, and that's a real test.
Just one final question. Dawn Butler was thrown out of the Commons chamber this week for calling Boris Johnson a liar and refusing to withdraw that. And that's known as unparliamentary language. It's not something that MPs are supposed to say about one another. Do you think she was right to persist in calling him a liar?
Well, I think it's a matter of fact that Boris Johnson is a liar. I don't think it's wrong to say that, because it's a statement of fact as far as I'm concerned.
Would you say that in the chamber?
Well, if I said it in the chamber, I'd get thrown out, so I'm not inclined to say it in the chamber. And I think there are different ways that I might phrase it. I mean, I think I have in the past called Boris Johnson a stranger to the truth, which is a slightly different way of saying it that doesn't get you thrown out of the chamber. But, every MP has a right to hold the government to account, to talk truth to power. And we do that. And, Boris Johnson does need to be held to account for the way that he conducts himself.